He abandoned his ill wife, believing she was worthless, but fate had other plans. Lila had always believed in love. She grew up in a quiet village, raised by parents who showed her that marriage meant loyalty, patience, and standing together through every hardship. So when she met Kofi, a wealthy and charming businessman in Accra, she thought she'd found her forever. He was everything a woman could dream of, kind, attentive, and completely in love with her. Their wedding was like a storybook, and for the first few years, their marriage was perfect. Kofi showered Lila with affection, took her on fancy trips, and always said he couldn't live without her. She felt lucky, grateful, and safe in his arms. But life has a way of testing love. One day, Lila started feeling tired and weak. At first, she brushed it off, thinking it was just stress. But the weakness grew worse. Some mornings, she could barely get out of bed. Her body ached, and she stopped feeling hungry. Worried, Kofi took her to the hospital. The doctors ran tests and finally shared the news. Lila had a rare illness. It wouldn't kill her right away, but it would need time, care, and patience to manage. She needed treatment, rest, and, most of all, support. At first, Kofi seemed worried. He stayed by her side, holding her hand, promising everything would be okay. But slowly, his patience started to fade. He didn't like seeing her weak, unable to do the things she used to do. She couldn't go to his business events, cook his favorite meals, or even smile like before. Kofi, who once said he loved her more than anything, began to change. His warm hugs turned cold. His kind words became sharp. Instead of comforting her, he sighed in frustration when she struggled to stand. Instead of holding her close, he made excuses to leave the house. One night, as Lila lay in bed, too weak to move, she overheard Kofi talking to his mother on the phone. "She just lies there all day, doing nothing," he said. "I didn't marry a sick woman. I need a wife, not a burden." His words cut through her like a knife. Tears streamed down her face, but she stayed silent. In that moment, she realized the man she loved was no longer the man she married. He saw her as useless, a problem he didn't want to deal with. Deep down, she knew this was only the beginning of her pain. Kofi was no longer the man Lila married. Day by day, he grew more distant. He came home late, barely looked at her, and hardly spoke. When she asked where he'd been, he snapped, "Do you expect me to sit here and watch you be sick all day?" His words hurt, but Lila stayed quiet. She told herself he was just stressed, that he'd come around. But he didn't. He started avoiding her completely, spending more time at his office or with friends. Lila woke up to an empty house, spent the day alone, and went to bed without hearing his voice. She felt like a ghost in her own home, invisible and unwanted. But the worst part wasn't just Kofi's silence, it was his mother. Nana Yaa. Nana Yaa had never liked Lila. She wanted Kofi to marry a woman from a wealthy, powerful family, not a simple girl with a kind heart. Now that Lila was sick, Nana Yaa saw her as nothing but a burden. "A sick wife is a curse," she told Kofi over and over. "She'll ruin your life, your business, everything. Get rid of her before it's too late." And Kofi listened. One night, it rained heavily, the sky dark and stormy. Lila sat on the couch, weak and tired, waiting for Kofi to come home. When he walked in, his face was cold, his eyes empty. He didn't even look at her. Instead, he grabbed her arm and pulled her up. "You need to leave," he said. Lila blinked, confused. "Leave? What do you mean?" "You can't stay here anymore," he said flatly. "I'm done taking care of you. Go." Tears filled her eyes. "Kofi, please, I have nowhere to go." He didn't care. He dragged her to the door, her weak body barely able to stand. The rain poured outside, but he didn't hesitate. He pushed her out and slammed the door shut. Lila stood there, soaked and shaking, too weak to walk, too heartbroken to cry. The man she loved had thrown her away like she was nothing. The cold rain hit her skin, but it was nothing compared to the coldness in Kofi's heart. She had lost everything and had nowhere to go. Lila wandered through the streets of Accra, shivering in the cold rain. Her clothes were drenched, her body weak, and every step felt impossible. She didn't know where she was going. She had no family in the city, no friends to turn to. The only person she'd ever relied on had thrown her out like trash. People passed by, but no one stopped. Some glanced at her, others ignored her completely. She tried to stay strong, but the hunger, exhaustion, and pain in her heart were too much. Her legs gave out, and everything went dark. When she opened her eyes, she wasn't on the streets anymore. She was lying on a small, worn-out bed in a tiny room. The smell of herbal medicine filled the air, and a dim lantern glowed in the corner. An old woman sat beside her, watching with kind, gentle eyes. "You're awake," the woman said softly. Lila tried to speak, but her throat was dry. The woman helped her sit up and handed her a warm cup of tea. The first sip burned, but it brought life back to her body. "My name is Mama Ajawa," the woman said. "I found you collapsed near the market. You looked half dead. Child, what happened?" Tears welled up in Lila's eyes, but she couldn't find the words. How could she explain that the man she loved had abandoned her? Mama Ajawa didn't push for answers. She patted Lila's hand and said, "You don't have to say anything. Just rest." Days passed, and under Mama Ajawa's care, Lila slowly started to heal. The old woman cooked warm meals, gave her herbal medicine, and made sure she rested. It was the first time in weeks that Lila felt safe. The first time in months that someone showed her kindness. One evening, as they sat outside under the setting sun, Mama Ajawa looked at her with a warm smile. "You're stronger than you think, my dear," she said. "The world tried to break you, but you're still here." Lila looked down at her hands. They were still shaky, still weak. But something inside her shifted, like a small spark of hope. She wasn't dead, she wasn't finished. Kofi had thrown her out, thinking she was worthless, but she would prove him wrong. She would survive, and one day, she would rise again. Lila never thought she'd smile again. But in Mama Ajawa's small home, surrounded by kindness, she started to believe in life once more. Her body was still weak, but her spirit was waking up. One morning, as she sat outside sipping tea, Mama Ajawa placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I want you to meet someone," she said with a smile. A few minutes later, a tall man walked in. He had a calm, confident presence and kind eyes that studied Lila carefully. "This is my nephew, Dr. Kofi," Mama Ajawa said. "He's a doctor, one of the best." Dr. Kofi sat beside Lila and spoke gently. "Auntie told me about you. I want to help." At first, Lila hesitated. She'd lost trust in people. But there was something about his voice, steady, safe. She nodded slowly. With Dr. Kofi's help, Lila got the treatment she'd thought was impossible. He took her to a good hospital, made sure she had the right medicine, and gave her the care she'd been denied. Weeks turned into months, and with each day, her strength returned. The pale, weak woman Kofi had abandoned was gone. She was healing, not just her body, but her soul. One day, as she looked in the mirror, she whispered, "I'm still here." For the first time, she saw not a victim, but a survivor. Kofi had taken everything from her, but she was still breathing, still standing. Now, she was ready to rebuild her life on her own terms. Lila had once been thrown out like she was nothing, left to die by the man she loved. But now, she was no longer that weak, helpless woman. She had survived. She had healed. With Mama Adjoa's support, she started small. She sold handmade soaps and oils at the local market, using skills she learned from the old woman. At first, business was slow, but Lila didn't give up. She worked hard, learning how to market her products, attract customers, and build something real. Then, something amazing happened. People started noticing her. Her products were special, natural, made with care. Word spread, and soon her small stall grew into a little shop. But Lila didn't stop there. She knew what it felt like to be abandoned, to feel hopeless and unwanted. She saw other women on the streets, women like her, thrown away by their husbands, with nowhere to go. She made a decision. Using money from her growing business, she started a foundation. It was a safe place for women who had been abandoned. She gave them shelter, food, and a chance to rebuild their lives. She taught them skills, helped them find jobs, and showed them they were worth more than their pain. The foundation grew quickly. Newspapers wrote about her. Wealthy women supported her cause. Soon, Lila became a well-known name in Accra. But it wasn't about fame. Lila was changing lives. She was proof that no matter how broken you are, you can rise again. One evening, as she stood on the balcony of her new home, looking at the city lights, she smiled. She had lost everything once, but now she had built something greater. She was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, a fighter, a woman who turned her pain into power. Kofi thought he had won. He had thrown Lila out, believing she was nothing without him. He wanted a fresh start with a younger, more beautiful woman. When he met Sefia, he was sure he'd found it. Sefia was stunning, tall, elegant, with a smile that could charm anyone. She made Kofi feel young again, alive. She laughed at his jokes, held his arm in public, and gave him all her attention. Within months, he married her, convinced this was the happiness he'd been missing. But Kofi was blind. He didn't see the truth behind Sefia's sweet words and gentle touches. She didn't love him, she loved his money. After the wedding, her true colors showed. At first, it was small things. She bought expensive clothes, threw big parties, and spent hours in fancy salons. Kofi brushed it off. She was his wife. She deserved the best. But then it got worse. Sefia traveled with friends, stayed in luxury hotels, and spent thousands on jewelry, cars, and designer bags. She didn't ask Kofi, she demanded. If he refused, she threw tantrums, calling him cheap or boring. He gave in, again and again, just to keep her happy. But his money wasn't endless. His business, once strong, started to crumble. Debts piled up, investors pulled away, and his employees whispered behind his back. Still, Sefia kept spending. One evening, Kofi sat alone in his office, staring at his bank statements. The numbers didn't lie, he was drowning. The company he'd built with years of hard work was falling apart. And the worst part? Sefia didn't care. He tried to talk to her, to explain they needed to cut back. She just rolled her eyes. That sounds like your problem, Kofi, she said, filing her nails. I didn't marry you to live like a poor woman. Kofi's heart sank. He had left Lila, a woman who loved him with all her heart, for this, a woman who saw him as nothing but a wallet. That night, for the first time, he felt real regret. But it was too late. Kofi had ignored the warning signs for too long. The late-night phone calls Sefia took in a hushed voice. The secret smiles she sent to her phone. The sudden weekend trips with friends where she barely called him back. He told himself it was nothing, that she was just enjoying life. But deep down, he knew the truth, he was losing her. One evening, after another exhausting day at his failing company, Kofi came home early. He was tired, frustrated, and desperate for peace. But something felt wrong. The house was too quiet. Sefia was supposed to be shopping, but her car was outside. He walked toward the bedroom, his heart pounding. Then he saw it. Sefia was in his bed, but she wasn't alone. A younger, muscular man lay beside her, laughing like he owned the place. Kofi's blood turned cold. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Sefia turned her head and saw him, but she didn't look guilty. She just sighed. "Oh," she said, sitting up lazily, "you're home early." Kofi's hands clenched into fists. "Who is this?" he roared. The man smirked. "Relax, old man, it's not like she ever loved you." Kofi's world shattered. Sefia didn't explain or beg for forgiveness. She stood up, wrapped a silk robe around herself, and looked at him with boredom in her eyes. "I was going to tell you sooner or later," she said casually. "You're broke, Kofi. What did you expect? I don't stay with losers." Kofi felt like he'd been punched. "After everything I gave you," he whispered, "all the money I spent on you." Sefia laughed. "Exactly, you gave me everything, and now you have nothing left." She glanced at the younger man and smiled. "But don't worry, I've already found someone who can afford me." Kofi wanted to scream, to throw something, to make her feel his pain. But before he could say another word, she grabbed her designer purse, picked up some jewelry, and walked out without looking back. The days that followed were worse. Sefia took everything, his cars, his properties, even the little money left in their joint account. Kofi was left with nothing but debt. His mansion was repossessed. His business collapsed. The man who once had everything now had nowhere to go. But the worst betrayal came from his own family. His mother, Nana Yaa, who had told him to throw Lila out, now turned her back on him. "You ruined yourself," she spat. "You had a good wife, but you threw her away for a gold digger." His siblings, his relatives, everyone he'd once helped, acted like he didn't exist. No one wanted to be tied to a failure. He was once the pride of his family, now he was an embarrassment. Kofi sat alone in a cheap, run-down apartment, staring at the empty walls. Everything was gone, his wealth, his reputation, his family, his so-called love. For the first time, he felt truly alone. Kofi had lost it all. His money, his business, his home, gone. Sefia had drained him dry and left without a second thought. His own family had abandoned him, calling him a fool. Now he was just another struggling man in Accra, living in a tiny apartment with barely enough money to eat. At night, he couldn't sleep. His body ached from stress, and his mind was haunted by memories. But one face kept coming back, Lila. The woman he'd thrown away. The wife he'd called useless. The one who had begged for his love, his support. He saw her now, not as a burden, but as the only person who had ever truly loved him. And he had destroyed her. Or so he thought. One day, as Kofi walked through the market, he saw a familiar face on a poster. It was Lila. She looked different, stronger, healthier, radiant. The poster advertised her foundation, a place for abandoned women to find hope and rebuild their lives. Kofi's heart sank. While he had fallen, Lila had risen. She had turned her pain into something beautiful, something powerful. He wanted to see her, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness. But deep down, he knew he didn't deserve it. Lila had moved on. She had built a life without him, a life full of purpose and love. Kofi, on the other hand, had nothing. He had thrown away the one person who mattered, and now he was paying the price. Lila's story spread across Accra. She became a symbol of strength, a woman who had been broken but refused to stay down. Her foundation grew, helping hundreds of women find their way. She never forgot the pain Kofi caused her. But she didn't let it define her. Instead, she used it to fuel her mission. Every woman she helped was a reminder that no one is worthless. That everyone deserves a second chance. As for Kofi, he faded into the shadows. He lived quietly, haunted by his mistakes. He saw Lila's face on billboards, in newspapers, on TV. Each time, it was a reminder of what he'd lost. Lila had once been his wife, his love, his everything. But he had thrown her away. And now she was so much more, while he was nothing at all.